Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network and presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on June 17th, 2023, and is current through the Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2 premiere episode, The Broken Circle, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a regular news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 5 television shows and 1 movie in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone. And my guest this week is returning guest and the organizer of the Star Trek Book Club on Twitter. It's Peter Hong. Peter, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Well, hey, Alex. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me back.
All right, Peter. Well, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you excited about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Well, Alex, I'd like to talk a little bit about Star Trek Resurgence, which is the new Star Trek. Yes, the new Star Trek video game, action adventure. I've been playing it. I'm about 3 hours into a 10 to 12 hour game, and I really like it. I think it captures the spirit of Star Trek very well. So it's like a story driven game. You're kind of inside a Star Trek, so playing a couple of the central characters in the story. So I think it's very well done. It's sort of the first, I think, action adventure game in, I'd say, 10 years. I remember the Kelvin game from like 2013. Yeah. So I know we have STO, we have a lot of mobile games, but I think it's great that there's this type of story-driven game. So you kind of follow a plot and a mission, and then you have all these choices that you have to make. So you have these different points of sort of forks in the road that you can go depending on the plot. And so you decide whether you do A or do B. So, and then you kind of proceed the story, and then you have another choices and just sort of keep on down the line. And it's broken down into chapters. It's almost like, little 15-minute chapters or so. Some of them are longer, some of them are shorter. And it also switches between Amanda Rydak, who's the first officer of the Resolute, which is the hero ship. So she's sort of the senior officer. And then it switches it to Chief Petty Officer Diaz, who's the kind of like an engineering crewman. So he's like the lower deck role. So it kind of bounces back and forth between their plot, and they actually intersect. Sometimes they interact with each other, or one person's action affects choices from that another, the other person needs to make. So it's very well done. I think I really enjoyed playing it. I look forward to, finishing it and then replaying it, doing different choices, like the choices I didn't take, and then just seeing how it plays out. I mean, just for the listeners who's interested, a couple of small little glitches. It deals with things like the subtitles and the audio. Sometimes they don't exactly match. Sometimes it kind of gets cut off or chopped off. Sometimes in the beginning, the save points, like where you save it, isn't exactly where you saved it isn't exactly clear. So when you have to go back, you kind of have to start a little bit, a few minutes earlier. And then sometimes the cinematics, you actually cannot, I haven't figured out how to advance it. Like if you want to, when you're on your replay, you kind of know what's happening. So it doesn't let you do that yet. But there's some, there's a patch that's coming up that the developer is working on. So we'll see how it goes. But I really enjoyed the whole experience, and I hope that the developer will do sequel or a DLC or something to kind of keep the story going. So yeah,
That's really cool. I have not played this one yet, but I remain intrigued to do so. I guess I'm curious to say you're about 3 hours through a 9-hour playthrough. Are you satisfied with the choices you have made to date, or are there points at which you're like, oh, I wish I'd done the other thing?
So far I've been satisfied with the choices I've made. So this is a Prime Peter, I guess you would say.
Yep.
The Prime Universe Peter. I think my next run through, I'll do like Mirror Universe Peter. I'll just sort of make the exact opposite just to see what happens. But it's a good, the choices are, some of them are actually, I had to think about it. There's also a timer. So there's a 10-second timer, and then you have to, 15-second timer, and you have to decide. So you have a little bit of a, press for time. But I think so far, all the choices I've made were the ones I would have made. There was one choice, actually. I made it, and then after finding out what happened and the consequences, I started to think about, oh, that was a good. I still would have made the same choice, but I said, oh, that's a good, a good decision point that the writers or the developers put in there because that actually had some, more consequences. Some choices are really easy, some are like low stakes choices, but there's a few high stakes choices. So yeah, but it's fun if you get a chance. I'm playing it on the PS4, so I think the folks on the PC and it's also available on the Xbox as well. Yeah. So and just for the listeners, even though it doesn't affect me, there's no inverted y-axis feature. So I know some of the gamers prefer that style of the controller. So I think the developer kind of heard that feedback and they're trying to, it may be part of the patch, but right now it's not. But I don't use that feature, so I'm fine with it. But yeah.
That's awesome. I read as I say, I haven't played the game yet, but I did read the prequel comics that IDW did, and I enjoyed those very much. So yeah, I am looking forward to playing this eventually.
Yeah. I read the prequel, and yeah, there is at least some references to it at the beginning. I think afterwards it kind of goes its own story, but in the beginning, as the setup in the sort of the chapter one, it does reference different comics. Yeah, but it's good that they do the comic. So yeah.
All right, well, let me tell you what I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week, which is since you run the Star Trek book club, I thought I would hold this for this week. I finished Somewhere to Belong, the new Star Trek Discovery novel by Dayton Ward that was released a few weeks ago, which is set in the 32nd century between the events of season 3 and 4, but has a lot of tie-ins to Discovery season 2 in a fun way. I thought this book actually it took really good advantage of the setting of Discovery and sort of, like it's not just one time period, it's not just the other time period, it's a little bit of both. It's sort of like the consequences of some of the choices they made in the 22nd century, seeing how those played out 1,000 years later. And a shame it's the second and it looks like now final Star Trek novel that we'll be getting in 2023, but not the final Star Trek novel. We'll talk about that a little later in the episode. But yeah, this was a fun one. I enjoyed it. It explored some of the things that like Stamets's, what's the right word for it? Dissatisfaction with Captain Burnham following the end of Discovery season 3, which was never really picked up and run within Discovery season 4. So it's nice to get some exploration for that. Yeah, it's a good book. It's a really solid entry in, sort of the like new Star Trek novel space. And yeah, folks have quite some time to be able to read it before the next book thumps on your doorstep. So definitely check this one out. Peter, have you read this one yet?
No, I haven't read that one yet, but it's definitely good to know that it's continues to be a good entries into the Star Trek novel list. I think Dayton Ward is the author of it. Correct. So he's always always enjoyed reading his novels. It's good that they added this novel because I think with Discovery going that serialized, approach, we don't really get a chance to explore that universe outside of the actual mission during the season. So it's good that they're branching off and doing these novels, even though it is not as, as you've mentioned before, and I totally agree with you, even though it's not as frequent as it could be or should be. So it's good that they bring that back. So yeah, so hopefully I think I'll get the chance to read that eventually.
All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Star Trek Strange New Worlds is back for Season 2. After releasing the first season on YouTube for free in the United States last week, Paramount continued the hype train all the way up to the season premiere's debut on Thursday with the release of an all-new episode of The Ready Room previewing Season 2 and a series of cast photos. I'm really excited that in the last couple of years we've seen a return to cast photos for Star Trek, and these are very cool, depicting each of the major characters of Star Trek Strange New Worlds alone, in pairs, and as a group. The 60s vibes are really hitting in these photos, and the Ready Room served up a delectable dish of anticipation for the second season, which has now premiered with The Broken Circle. Peter, what did you think of the premiere of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. It was a good first episode, introducing Pelia, which actually is probably my favorite little section of the story. Seeing a new character, having Spock be in command, which I think is it's actually reminded me of TOS's The Galileo 7, which is actually one of my favorite. My number 2 TOS episode is that one. So it's like, Spock in command. He kind of continues his developing on and learning that role and responsibility. So I think it was good. It was definitely a good start to the season, and it kind of helps set up, the Born at the end and kind of setting up things that's going to be happening. Pike and Una at the beginning. So it's almost a little bit of a, we're back and, we're going to have, get things ready. So it's a little bit of a transition setup episode, which a lot of season premieres are in different times of Trek. So yeah, I think overall it was good. And I also like the references and the Easter eggs that comes up in every episode. So the origin of the Spock's Vulcan liar was fun to see. They say, oh, it's Mabenga who started that. So seeing that and seeing the Klingon D7 battleship, classic. So I think that was another nice little touch. So yeah, I think overall it's pretty good. Probably the one thing I was just okay about was that whole the super serum or the adrenaline liquid that
Yeah, sure.
Mbenga and Chapel used, and the sort of the fight scenes. I know the fight scenes that came after that which I thought was a little bit too long, but yeah, that was the only little thing. But other than that, it was a good story, and I'm looking forward to what's going to be happening next.
Yeah, I'm thrilled Strange New Worlds is back. I will admit at this stage that since the season's now out, I have actually seen the first 6 episodes of the season. And I will say The Broken Circle was probably either my least favorite or my second least favorite. It's either number 5 or 6 on my current rankings for Star Trek Strange New Worlds season 2. That's not to say it's a bad episode, because I really liked it. I just think that lots of the other episodes this season are better than The Broken Circle. I think you described it very pithily before we started recording, which is that it was a good but not great season premiere. And I think I completely agree with you on that. Like, obviously, I really enjoyed the Klingon stuff. I really like the fact that they have abandoned their nervousness about revisiting the Klingons and have made a decision about the Klingon design aesthetic moving forward that I actually really appreciate and agree with, right? Like, they have made the decision to set the Discovery style Klingons aside, and that's a good thing in my opinion. And yeah, it's fun. I saw someone say, they were sort of talking about like the cliffhanger to season 1 being Una arrested and then not really revisiting that in episode 1. But, someone was like, well, do you necessarily want to start a season with a courtroom drama, right? Like, that's not necessarily like real sort of season premiere fodder. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I see that. And obviously we know that the next episode, because we played the clip from it a couple of weeks ago on this show, next week's episode will be the episode that will kind of be the sort of courtroom drama episode for Strange New Worlds season 2. It's really nice to have the characters back. It's really nice to have the Strange New Worlds vibe back. I have lots of thoughts about this season that I'm obviously not going to say a single one of, because many of them pertain to episodes that come after The Broken Circle. But there is a lot to look forward to this season. And I think, I really like Carol Kane's character. The accent took me a minute to the screeners do not have subtitles. And so the first scene she was in, I was like, well, hold on a second. Like what is going on here? Like, what is this accent? And it took me, I watched it and then I rewound it and watched it again. And then I was like, all right, I get it now. Now my brain is sort of locked on to the way that she's speaking. But like a super fun character, a super fun concept too, right? This idea that, these ultra long-lived people, right? And obvious that, sort of more about her story will kind of play out over the remainder of the season, and who are the Lanthanites and what are they and all of that stuff. Like, I think it's pretty clear that that's coming in future episodes. And yeah, it's just it's lovely to have Strange New Worlds back, and this was a good episode, but in my opinion it continues the upswing from this point.
Great. Yeah, no, thanks for the feedback. Glad to know that the next few episodes will continue the positive trajectory that this episode started. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned about Carol Kane. I actually haven't seen her previous work on. I know she's very popular over the years in TVs and movies, but I just haven't seen it in the stuff I've seen. So when I first heard her, I did have subtitles because I watched the last night. So I understood what she was saying, but I kind of also I was a little bit startled, I guess, because I just wasn't used to it. But this is great. That's part of the reason I think the charm of her character. She actually reminded me a little of a Guinan type role. Someone who's a bit wise and experienced and kind of willing to help other people, just like she helped Spock kind of, seal the Enterprise, this week to help other people. And so I think that is a kind of a nice, nice character and personality. So I think she would fit fit well with the crew while also bring something, different and dynamic into the mix. So I'm looking forward to seeing her. And you mentioned about having the first episode not be a courtroom episode.
Yeah.
It actually reminded me of actually Lower Decks, because how the last season of Lower Decks ended with an arrest, and
Yes.
then the first episode, the arrest was resolved off screen, and then they kind of just moved on. So
Yes.
so I think this getting, maybe these days trying to do something different, or trying to do something that's not expected might be sort of the trend. So Strange New Worlds did that as well here.
Yes, listeners who heard me on Trek Ranks episode 147 know that one of the things that annoys me about modern Star Trek is the way that they all use the same ideas for their season finales. There have been like 6 season finales that have shared 3 ideas or 3 particular story beats, like the end of Lower Decks season 2 and the end of Strange New Worlds season 1, both ending with a major character being arrested in the very final scene. Riker saving the day at the end of Lower Decks season 1 and Picard season 1. And then the most recent being a computer program taking over Starfleet at the end of Prodigy season 1 and Picard season 3. And our heroes being the only ones who aren't affected by it and needing to take on a whole fleet of starships in order to save themselves. It is wild the way that there is so much commonality between how these seasons end. But I think, and obviously I'll hold more comments about it until next week, because it really requires seeing next week's episode. But I mean, what do we know about next week's episode based off of what's already publicly available? It is your classic courtroom Star Trek episode, and in my opinion, a very good one.
Yeah, great. Yeah, always up for a Star Trek courtroom episode. It wouldn't be a Star Trek series without one.
Exactly. Well, one of the chief architects of the creation of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, after fan enthusiasm pushed Paramount to greenlight the show, that being current co-executive producer Akiva Goldsman, who was an executive producer on Star Trek Picard and showran season 2, has said that the fan interest for Star Trek Legacy is, quote, undeniable. Speaking with Cinema Blend, Goldsman said, quote, "Well, I think what Terry did with season 3 is so extraordinary, and I think that the appetite for it is, I think, undeniable. So certainly, I am a huge advocate of some version of that continuing. It was so spectacular, I think, what he did. And so, right now, there's no pitching of anything because the world is shut down due to the writer's strike. But I would really hope, let me put it like this, I signed the petition for Star Trek Legacy 2. The petition that Kiva's referring to is the change.org petition for Star Trek Legacy. That petition now has exceeded 60,000 signatures, which is nearly double the amount of signatures on a similar petition after Discovery Season 2 that called for Strange New Worlds. Successfully, of course, because now we're watching the second season of Strange New Worlds. Can Akiva help work his magic again, this time in favor of Star Trek Legacy? Well, only time will tell. And it's important to note that Goldsman had seemingly no role in Picard Season 3, given he had moved from Picard Season 2 over to Strange New Worlds Season 1 at the time. Peter, would you like to see a Star Trek Legacy?
Oh, yes, definitely. I'm definitely ready for seeing it as soon as they can do it. So I think for me, Picard Season 3 is my favorite of the seasons of the new Star Trek since 2017. So I think Legacy, they really set it up very well for a follow-up. And I think, seeing the 7 and the MSG, on new adventures in the early 25th century, and maybe, having an opportunity to bring back some of the characters that we've seen before for, cameos or one-offs, as well as introducing new ones. I think it's really sets up well. So I'm definitely I'm one of the many tens of thousands of fans who signed a petition who's, ready to see Legacy. I think probably the open questions is, where to slot it, because, there is these series that are out there. Academy has been announced. So having another series, I don't know if we have to wait for a series to end before we have a Legacy to come back. I know animated series tend to last a little longer because you could continue it because you don't have sets and actors being there. So it could be up to Strange New Worlds, which is so new still and very popular, or Academy, which hasn't been filmed yet. So
new, the paint's not even wet, let alone dry.
Yeah, it's like, still working on, getting everything set up for that one. So I'm not sure when. I was thinking, I don't know if this is possible, but maybe, going the, Michelle Yeoh route with Section 31, maybe having some type of legacy movie every few years or something like that. So it doesn't have to, end the series in order to have a show or have a story about legacy. So it could be more of a different, maybe a movie, maybe animated, maybe something, else to complement that they can do without waiting for something to end. So that would be good. Anything that can be done to get it out there would be great because I think there is a demand for a show like this.
Yeah, I think, sort of right, like this is all just people answering questions in interviews. And, Akiva is not Alex Kurtzman, and he had a very minimal role by the end of Picard, and, is obviously co-showrunner for Strange New Worlds and clearly has some influence on the franchise. He's been attached to Discovery, Picard, and Strange New Worlds, and has some influence on Alex Kurtzman. But ultimately, like, how much does he matter to the creation of Star Trek Legacy? I don't know. You probably have to think a little bit, but maybe not a lot of it. But I think, what does this demonstrate? Well, it demonstrates that people who are at the most senior levels of the Star Trek production have definitely heard loud and clear. Now, as Kurtzman said, they've heard loud and clear, but it's encouraging to hear that from other people in various senior roles that, like, they know what fans want, right? And they know what the reaction to Picard season 3 has been. And I think, that does sort of indicate that not that the opening exists for it to happen necessarily, but that if they do make a decision not to do it, it's not that they don't know how much people want it when they do it. They still might make the decision not to do it for all kinds of reasons. But not knowing that there's fan interest in it, or not thinking that there's fan interest in it, will not be the reason that they ultimately say no to it. And I think that's kind of the most that we as fans can do, right? We're not the studio, we're not business people. Right. All we can kind of say is this is something that we as the fans want and would like to see happen, and hope that's enough for it to translate into actually happening. Whether it does or not, completely out of our hands. But I do think that there is an element of being able to feel somewhat good about having successfully sort of done that piece of it, which is made the case to the studio that, like, this is something that we really want to see. And then, to the extent that that has any impact on the decision making about whether to move forward or not, we know that we've had that impact. As to whether it has an impact or not, again, who knows? We'll just have to see. You said, I think you have to figure it's a while away, just because they do seem like they are trying to reduce the number of Star Trek productions from the 5 TV shows that there are now to some smaller number. And we have 2 live action shows, one very successful one in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and one that we don't know what it is yet, but is definitely being made, which is Star Trek Starfleet Academy. And so it's going to be some time. Either there needs to be an extremely compelling business case for it, or an opening on the schedule for them to do it. And it might be some time until that happens. As you say, maybe with this sort of, like, they've talked about the Michelle Yeoh Section 31 movie being, like, not a one-off in the sense that they would like to do, Alex Kurtzman said they want to do one of these every couple of years. So you could very easily see the second movie down on the list being one that picks up from Star Trek Picard season 3 in some way, shape, or form. And if that continues to be successful, maybe that just adds to the clamor for a TV show down the line. So, I mean, it does feel like it is, not imminent, but it also feels like, in terms of what we as fans can accomplish in this regard, which is communicating to the studio our interest in this, that part of it is being done successfully.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point about that. For us, Star Trek is a fandom. For Paramount, it's a business. And with streaming, going through all these changes, and with all these different competitors, and, everyone, whether they want to renew their subscription or not renew a subscription, it all affects their bottom line. And producing Star Trek shows, especially live action, are pretty expensive as well. Yep. So having, for 10 episodes a season. So it's definitely they have to look through everything to see if it's, justifiable. And hopefully it will be, but I think you're right in that it will be sometime down the road until things sort of shake out, things become a little bit more clearer. But it's great that the fans all got together, just like, back in TOS days, and season 2 that was able to help season 3 come about, and Discovery season 2 that helped lead to Strange New World. So fan involvement is very important in general on a lot of topics, including helping to the Paramount and let them know that things that we're interested in. So like I said, we did a lot, and we'll just maybe we could just sort of keep the awareness up as the months and years go by, keep the awareness up that we still want to kind of went down the road that would be, help them, hopefully help them decide a little bit on what direction to take the franchise.
Well, fans of Star Trek video games are having quite a year. After the release last month of the adventure role-playing game Star Trek Resurgence by Dramatic Labs, which we were just discussing in the episode opening, Paradox Interactive have announced a new Star Trek strategy video game that will release later this year called Star Trek Infinite. The official press release explains more about the game. Quote, Star Trek Infinite puts players in command of one of 4 major powers in the galaxy: the United Federation of Planets, Romulan Star Empire, Cardassian Union, or Klingon Empire. Each major power possesses individualized traits, stories, quests, and more to make their play feel distinct. Players can send fleets to explore the Alpha and Beta quadrants, manage an economy, and navigate diplomatic endeavors. As fans of the Star Trek franchise, we are committed to creating a game that stays true to the spirit of Star Trek The Next Generation in both its ideals and its lore, said Martin Cowell, CEO of Nimble Game Entertainment. Working within these bounds still allows for a wellspring of opportunities. Star Trek Infinite rewards explorative play, gives players freedom to choose how they respond to the events that unfold in front of them, and provides a strong sense of identity as you lead your empire through the galaxy. Whether building the influence of their homeworlds or risking exploration into the unknown, Star Trek Infinite gives players endless choices and the opportunity to shape the destiny of their favorite Star Trek powers. Fans will experience a game faithful to the lore of a timeless franchise as they embark on an unforgettable journey through space, encounter new civilizations, and forge a path among the stars. Is this a 2023 version of my personal favorite Star Trek video game of all time that I played obsessively as a kid? That being Star Trek Birth of the Federation? Boy, we can certainly hope so. Peter, are you a fan of strategy games, and what do you think of the look of Star Trek Infinite?
Oh, yes. I'm definitely a fan of strategy game. That's my favorite genre of video games. So,
did you play Birth of the Federation back in the day?
Actually, technically, yes.
Technically, yes.
But what happened, well, my little video game history, I got into video games in the early 90s. So I actually like Civilization, which was the strategy game, like Civilization 1 and 2 were probably my favorite game, but SimCity 1 and 2, because I'm really dating myself, were my second favorite. These were the OG versions of those games. So I played a lot of those, many, many hours of those games. And then I kind of stopped in the mid 90s. So I missed the golden era of Star Trek video games because that's when the Star Trek video games. I actually played the Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, was this a movie-based tie-in game, which really wasn't very good. It was like wireframes and stuff like that. So it wasn't that good. But I did play 25th Anniversary, which was good. But I kind of stopped somewhere in the middle, so I didn't last that long in there. And I think I played a little of Judgment Rights. Again, I didn't finish it. I kind of stopped. So I actually purchased Birth of the Federation, and I installed it. I loaded it. I played a little of it, and that was the end. So I didn't really. I missed that era. And then I got back into Star Trek video games more like in the console, in the like Encounters. This is the PS2 era. Encounters, Conquest. They were okay, but they didn't really capture. They were more like very basic ones. So I really like the idea of Birth of the Federation, and I think Starfleet Command was a little bit like this type of game as well. So yes, I'm really looking forward to Infinite because I think this would give me a chance to sort of do what I didn't get a chance to do back then. Sort of play that type of strategy game in the Star Trek universe. So I'm going to keep an eye on this one because like you said, I'm glad that Star Trek video games with Resurgence that we talked about, and with this one, hopefully they could, have a few more options than what's been available the last, last 10, 20 years or so.
Yes. On the wall behind me is a framed postcard, like a promotional postcard for Star Trek Birth of the Federation that they released around the time that the video game came out. It's art from the box that the game came in. And I loved that game as a kid. I mean, my memory of it is that I basically played it for like 6 solid months, just constantly. Like, you couldn't pry me away from the computer. It was turn-based strategy, and it was great. It was like It's same kind of deal. You were the Federation, the Klingons, the Romulans or the Cardassians, or the Ferengi. That one you could play the Ferengi as well. And same idea, right? You like start off with just one sector and then you spread out and, you make first contact with alien races. And it was all next generation themed, just like this one. And so you'd make first contact and then, depending on whether you were the Klingons or the Federation, first contact would go one way or go another way. You sort of built the economy of the power that you were working for. You interacted with the others, and the Borg would show up at some point, and you'd have to defeat them.
Sounds like they're going to be here for this one because they were part of the trailer. So
right,
they'll be back.
You would build ships, you would build star bases, you would sort of all the stuff you needed to like run a major galactic power. The problem with Birth of the Federation, though, was the longer you played, the longer the turns took to process everything that was happening. And by the time you hit about turn 100, the game was basically unplayable because it would take like 10 minutes to process a turn. It was ridiculous.
Wow. Okay.
But hey, that was like a 1990. I think that game came out in like 98, maybe. So, it was cutting edge for its day. And like that is the game that I have always been like, oh, if they were to remake any game, or last year when GOG.com put the like old games up, Armada 2, Elite Force, I was sort of hoping against hope that Birth of the Federation would be one of them, but it wasn't. So like now this just looks very much like a new version of it, right? Like it's not, right? Like that was over 20 years ago, unfortunately. But we're now at this point where like it's a version of this game. It's the same concept, it's the same basic idea, and like I'm here for it. I'm really excited for this one. This is the game that I have wanted to play again for many, many years. And now I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to do a slightly different version of it because it comes from a completely new people, but same core concept, same basic idea. And it's a core concept and basic idea that I really, really enjoyed. So I'm thrilled about this.
Yeah, I think we'll probably share our experiences once we, purchase the game and start playing it and seeing how things go. It's funny you mentioned about with the blog with the blog from last year, because I think Steam also had a few of the earlier games available. So I purchased like the 5-pack or the 4-pack of the 25th anniversary. I think Starfleet Academy. And I was looking for Birth of the Federation because, like I said, I remember I purchased it. I didn't really play it, but I think I want to try it again. But it just hasn't been available in those marketplaces. So it's great that they're bringing that back, bring a game like that back. So probably the only thing I just have to check is more like the hardware requirements. I'm just going back to the old days just to make sure, because I'm more of a laptop user, not a desktop user. So I'll just have to see if my laptop can support the requirements. But if it can, I do want to purchase it, and hopefully maybe it'll go. I don't know if it'll ever be available on console. It's hard to play those types of games on consoles, but if they can do something to make that all the keyboard shortcuts be available on console, that would be great. That could open up another avenue of fans who can purchase and play this game. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. Well, and lastly this week, we can hallelujah and rejoice because Simon and Schuster have finally announced the next Star Trek novel, but you will have to wait until 2024 for it to hit retailers. Star Trek Picard Firewall by David Mack will tell the story of Seven of Nine between the events of Star Trek Voyager and Picard's first season, and will release in February of next year, meaning we get just 2 Star Trek novels in 2023. I'll just note that's the lowest number of novels we've gotten in over 40 years. The official blurb for the book reads as follows: 2 years after the USS Voyager's return from the Delta Quadrant, Seven of Nine finds herself rejected for a position in Starfleet, and instead finds a new home with the interstellar rogue law enforcement corps known as the Fenris Rangers. The Rangers seem like an ideal fit for Seven, but to embrace this new destiny, she must leave behind all she's ever known and risk losing the most important thing in her life, her friendship with Admiral Catherine Janeway. David Mack has spoken before about how he made a pitch for a 7 of 9 Picard novel during the show's first season, but the producers nixed it because they wanted the option to explore that story on screen. But now it appears that the show is over, the pitch is moving ahead. Mack has said that he is about halfway through writing the manuscript. Peter, are you excited for the next Star Trek Picard novel?
Oh, yes. I'm always ready for another new novel that explores that area of the Star Trek universe. So I think with Seven of Nine, especially with role in the 3 seasons of Picard, I think her character continues to develop popularity. New fans who may not have watched Voyager, so their first entry into learning about Seven was through Picard. So this gives them another way to explore and everybody to learn about her character, and especially that those years between Voyager and between Picard. So sort of what's that transition? How does she adjust? Coming back from the Delta Quadrant, does she end up in the Federation Rangers? And the little reference to Admiral Janeway that she mentioned during Picard. I think it was season 2 that she mentioned.
Yep.
Kind of build that out and find out more details, and maybe even maybe if hopefully maybe even maybe some cameos of some of the Voyager characters when they return from the Delta Quadrant. Maybe that could be sprinkled in there as well. So definitely looking forward to it, and I'll be reading that eventually as well. So, and we'll see what now that going back to Legacy, kind of see what her story going forward. This gives a chance to do some of the backstory. Actually, one quick anecdote related to Trek Book Club. I went back into my spreadsheet as to the books that we've read, and it turns out when I took over the Trek Book Club, I used the method of having polls. So I would send polls or tweet out polls to the fans who are part of the book club to see which book they want to read. And so the last 3 of the Picard novels, The Dark Veil, Rogue Elements, and Second Self, they all won the poll that they were part of. So, I mean, it's a small sample size. It's not a big community, but it's a representative, I think, of a interest and a demand in some more Star Trek stories, Star Trek Picard stories. So because all of these, there were like 4 options, and the Picard novel won each of the option. The Last Best Hope was the first novel was done sort of before I joined, so that was a sort of a different model. But the last 3 novels were all winners of their poll. So we all read them. They were all popular. They all sort of the first 2 were kind of prequels. Like Dark Veil was a bit of a prequel. Rogue Elements was a prequel of Rio. So Seven, this will be a prequel as well. So it's good to give more stories, to provide more stories for the characters, since the serial seasons really focuses on the specific plot and the specific story. So this is another way to provide more details for that universe. So yeah, definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is very cool. I love the idea of them going in this direction. I do wish that they had maybe chosen a female author to tell the story of Seven of Nine's story between Voyager and Picard, but set that aside. David Mack is an extremely accomplished Star Trek novelist, even if his last couple of books have maybe left me a little cold. I'm still he still has written my favorite Star Trek novels of all time. So I'm excited for this one. I'm also excited that, now that Picard itself is over, the books having a bit more freedom to do some more of this character stuff, right? In which they are pulling in, some of these established characters and having them interact with the Picard characters, right? It sounds very much from the blurb that Janeway is going to have a role in this book in some way. And 2-3 years ago, you probably would not have gotten a novel that had Janeway in it, given the Prodigy stuff and was she going to show up in Picard. And now it's well, no, Picard's a finished product. We know everything about these characters that we're going to know for now. And so, let's use this as an opportunity to really explore filling in the gaps a little bit between what happened between the end of Star Trek Nemesis and the beginning of Star Trek Picard, because, we still really want that and would like to see that. Obviously, they can't go too far, because the hope is that Legacy comes along and that will probably go even further in terms of crafting out, what some of those differences are and what's happened in the interim. But I don't care so much about that, in the sense that the books don't need to necessarily line up completely with the TV shows. I want to enjoy the book at the moment that I'm reading it with the information that I have at the time. And so, so what if they tell this story and later an episode of Star Trek Legacy tells the same thing slightly differently, right? Well, I hopefully enjoyed the book. I hopefully enjoyed the episode, and that's all we really need from our entertainment. Yeah. So I like that they're moving in this direction. I really hope that now that they've announced a new Star Trek novel for 2024 that will get a couple more than just two next year. And whatever has been going on behind the scenes that has slowed publishing to a crawl, I really hope we're coming to the end of it, because we've been in it for a little while now. And that it's nice to have a book to look forward to. It sucks that it's not until February, though I guess as the Trek Core book reviewer, it means I get some time off for the next 6 months. But we'll see what the next Star Trek Picard novel has for us.
Yeah, and I think that with David Mack, actually, I remember his Destiny's trilogy is probably my favorite. And really like his Vanguard. Yeah, okay, so we're on there. And then Vanguard, I like his the novels that he wrote in that series.
Yes.
So I think it's a pretty good, and so I think it's interesting. And like you said, when I read Star Trek novels, I tend to try not to connect it so much with the TV shows themselves. So in a way, they're a bit of a standalone, and I kind of enjoy the novels for the novels. I try not to connect, but that's just my way. I know others might be a little bit more try to find the connections between those two mediums, but I tend to kind of be on the other side of it. So so we'll see. Looking forward to it, and I definitely hope we'll have more new novels coming up, because as you say, it's been pretty quiet on that front, and it's definitely time to try to have a few more going forward.
All right, well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain, but it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, my guest and I give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So Peter, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
Okay, Alex, this is more of a wish.
Yep, go for it.
I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know if it's realistic or not. So, but it kind of builds on the Strange New Worlds Lower Deck crossover episode that's going to come sometime in season 2. So my wish is actually have almost like take that to the next level. It's almost like having a crossover in which it actually brings in all the different Star Trek series over the years. So, like I said, I don't know how realistic it is. It's not, but it could be. I'm thinking, starting with the Enterprise TOS era, and a section of the story could start there, and then it goes into the 90s Trek era, goes into then Strange New Worlds 90s, going to follow chronologically, and going into Discovery, into the future. So it's almost like, and even bringing in the Kelvin timeline, TAS, all the different iterations that we've had over the 50 some odd years of Star Trek. So it could be, I don't know, maybe not a series, but more like a movie or couple of movies, or a limited series, or something that can at least talk of a crossover. It's almost like the ultimate crossover in which it actually brings everything together. And it wouldn't, it could be sort of a few characters. I know, it's a little bit harder for the older shows, but bringing that in, and it could be temporal Cold War related, because that's kind of an easier way of using that framing plot to do something like this. It could be time travel, which is pretty popular in the franchise. But it's something like that, because it's just really taking that crossover concept and just expanding it to pretty much encompass the whole franchise. So I did the new comics did a little of that with the Theseus, the Star Trek mainline comics and IDW. So kind of brought like characters of different ones. So this kind of just brings that a little bit to expands that idea. So again, I'm not sure if it's realistic, not sure if it'll ever happen, but it's just a nice thought to have, something to think about the show.
Yeah, I learned recently they almost did something like that in the late 90s. There was an effort to put together like it was not like a full movie, but like a movie for IMAX. When IMAX was a new thing, it would be a Star Trek IMAX project, and the idea was that you crossed over the four. At that point, you had characters from each of the 4 TV shows: original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. I can't remember how far they got in the process. Obviously they never shot anything. I don't even know if they had a script for it, but like they at least had a concept, and were moving forward with it. I love that idea. One of the sort of versions of that idea that I actually think they should think about is one of the first sets of novels I read, just to sort of branch over from the last news story into this section section of the show was the Star Trek Invasion series. I don't know if you've ever read that one. There's an original series novel, a Next Generation novel, a Deep Space Nine novel, and a Voyager novel. And they're each set in the respective times of the show, but there is like an enemy that that they encounter each of the 4 times. And there are ways that even though the crews themselves don't interact, they're having separate stories. The story itself is one story, and there are characters and themes and ideas that run throughout the whole thing. And I've always thought that something like that would be really cool, right? Like, you know, a ship finds something in one series and then it's revisited in another series. You know, like, you don't necessarily have to have everybody in the same place at the same time, but you could have sort of a story that crosses over, even if it is not a crossover necessarily itself. Right. I just think there are lots of cool ways that they could explore doing things like that if they wanted to, that I kind of wish they would do a little bit more of. I'm really hoping that the Lower Deck Strange New Worlds crossover is very successful, because success breeds doing more stuff like that. And I think there are more crossover opportunities that it would be fun to explore.
Yeah, hopefully they'll do that. And actually, you just reminded me, I think there's another book series called The Badlands. Which was similar, in which they had, like, I think it was two books. That one I read, yes. I read 2 books, in which it had it took place at their own time, but you had this sort of overarching story that, that was going throughout the novel. So yeah, so hopefully, like you said, I think the few stills that came out of the trailer for season 2 of the crossover looks really good. I like those uniforms. I like those Lower Decks uniforms that they created for that episode. So I think it'll be successful, and I hope they could, like you say, I hope they'll be able to do something like that again, or expand on that idea again.
All right, well, let me give you my wish for this week, and this wish is a listener submission. This one comes from Jeff Owen at NCC17 Formula 1 on Twitter, and Jeff's wish is that, so we know there's a time travel episode coming. We know that it features La'an and Kirk. And Jeff's wish is that La'an and Kirk find themselves in the modern day United States, and that while there, they meet up with one Cristobal Rios in a surprise cameo from a Picard season 2 favorite, which I love that wish. I'm not going to comment on it because, as I say, I've seen the first 6 episodes, so like I know whether this wish comes true or not. Peter, what do you think about Jeff's wish to have a Rios cameo in Strange New Worlds? Speaking of crossovers.
Jeff? That is a great idea. I really enjoyed Cristobal Rios during his time on Picard, and I was a little bit sad to see that he wouldn't be returning. So he's probably my favorite of the new characters from that series. So if they can at least bring him back, even if it's for the cameo, even though we could see him back, it would be great to have at least a follow-up on what happened on his final appearance on season 2. So I think that's a good idea, and I just hope they could do something like that. I guess we'll find out in the coming weeks whether it comes or not. But with the, like you said, with the interest in various crossovers and with all the different, potential and for that because of the different series, and with time travel, you kind of do some extra things with time travel that you couldn't do, without that story. Right. So I hope that we get a chance to see him again.
Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Section 31, Starfleet Academy, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, or Prodigy that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek, or email them to me at weeklytrek@thetricordertransmissions.com, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Peter Hong, for joining me today. Peter, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
Sure. Well, my handle on Twitter is at PeterTrek1, the number 1. So feel free to connect with me there. I'm also the host of the Trek Book Club, and to find out more information about the book club, you can check out Trek Book Club on Twitter. We discuss Trek novels approximately every 6 weeks over a weekend. We also recently relaunched the Trek Book Club podcast. The link is also on the Twitter page. So we have a couple of episodes that's available, and we're hoping to have a few more in the near future as well. So you can check that out. So thank you very much, Alex. It's great to talk Trek with you at any time, and hope all goes well. And we'll be enjoying Strange New World Season 2.
And you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Peter. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.